Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. If I sound nasal, it's because I had Mexican food yesterday. And I can tell you last night when I was with Alexis eating Mexican food, I says, I'm going to be all congested tomorrow. But at least I know, right? Most people run to the doctor. They don't realize how strong of an effect your diet has on your health. They really don't. It's really sad. So many people could be so much better today if they did. We have a great show. This show has been in the making for quite some time. We did a couple shows last year about DHM. One of them because a university in California discovered that it had profound effects on those with type 2 diabetes and their liver health. And it was always hailed as an anti-hangover drug, which works. I use it anytime I drink before I go to bed, and I wake up in the morning and I don't feel like I drank the night before. But when I started reading about it, I thought, man, could it be that this compound, this plant compound, is so much more? And of course, I turned to my good friend, Joel Green. I said, Joel, I need somebody who can do some scientific research and report to my audience. And he introduced me to Dr. Alexis Cowan, who is amazing. And what she has delivered today is amazing. But I think you're going to find out after today's show that wherever you can get it, you're going to want to use some DHM for a variety of different reasons, nothing to do with anti-hangover. Before we get started, I have to thank our title sponsor, and that is Legendary Foods. Legendary Foods has some new packaging. Their new packaging is amazing, but the stuff inside the package is still what I've told people it is, and that is the single best healthy snack in the world today. Less than 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high-quality protein, 4 to 5 net carbs if you're a keto, low-carb person. But unlike other products that we eat because they fit our dietary template, you will not sacrifice taste. You will swear you are eating a turnover-like piece of cake. They have great fillings, a variety of flavors that you can't even imagine. But Ron Penna and his team have captured what it feels like and tastes like to eat cake. But there's no flour in this. There's no cake in this. It's amazing. And here's the big thing. You may be willing to eat a crappy protein bar because it fits your macros, but your kids aren't. You will have to fight your kids because they will want to eat every single tasty pastry that you bring into the house. You know what? Let them. If they think they're eating crap like their friends, but they're not, then you just did something as a parent. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off everything that you buy at Legendary Foods. It's site-wide. They have great nut butters. They have great seasoned almonds. They're amazing. They really, really are. All right. So now, without further delay, bring my guest on. I feel like I should have like a drum roll for you, Dr. Cowan. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here finally.
Yeah, you worked hard on this. And I have to tell you, you delivered a lot more than I expected. So kudos to you. Before we get started, let's tell people a little bit about you. You're a graduate of?
Sure. So I finished my Ph.D. At Princeton, in the molecular biology department. My research focus wasn't really molecular biology, though. It was more so focused on metabolic physiology and understanding the impact of different nutrition interventions, fasting, and exercise interventions on tissue metabolism. That was my primary focus while I'm there. And I also have a very strong personal interest in nutrition and exercise.
because you like to train, right? And you
Yep.
you know, it's really funny when you tell people that you have an interest in nutrition, exercise. I feel compelled that we have to explain it, but the reality is that everyone should have an interest in nutrition and exercise. We aren't the outliers; they are. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we are the outliers is explaining a lot about the current state of the Western world, I would say.
Yeah. Well, and actually, it's global. It's a global problem today. We have nutrition so confused. Like my intro, like I knew I was going to be all congested today because I had Mexican food last night. It's most likely the tortilla chips that I overate because I'm a gavone. But you know, it may be the beans. I don't know. But whenever I go to Mexico the next day, I sound like I have a cold, and it's predictable. It's predictable. So, all right. So let's get on to the subject at hand. So we're going to talk about DHM, which stands for dihydromyracetin. Is that correct?
So I think it's actually pronounced dihydromyracetin.
Okay.
Pretty close, though. Yeah.
That's cool.
But mostly we'll go by DHM. It's also known as ampreloxetine, or vine tea, or rattan tea. It goes by different names depending on what part of the world you're in. In China, it's been used for a very long time in like TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. So there it's usually consumed as like a full spectrum tea, known as vine tea or rattan tea. And essentially DHM, dihydromyracetin, is the major flavonoid found in this plant called ampreloxetine. It's also found in the Japanese raisin tree, so yes, it can be found in other plants as well. It seems to be highest percent-wise in ampreloxetine, though.
So do you think that are there some plants? So we've talked about Raponticum cardamoid extracts on this show for years with Rob Regish. And there's lots of sources, but there seems to be the one source that was always written about in the Russian literature that they saw these particular effects with. Do you think that while it's the same thing in all of these different plants, there may be some magic to one source over another?
So that's a great question. A lot of the studies that have been done on DHM are actually done with like an isolate. So it's not a full spectrum extract from one of these plants. It's a synthesized or chemically extracted, purified DHM. So it does seem to have quite a bit of activity by itself. But that doesn't mean that we should discount an entourage effect where other molecules in the plant are having a synergy effect with DHM to like enhance its effects. So I think that's something important to consider, though it's not really going to be covered in the literature at this point. There's some work done in like looking at full plant extracts, but the majority of like the molecular biology work will kind of isolate the compound, because isolating variables is basically a cornerstone of molecular biology work if you're trying to figure out signaling pathways, et cetera.
Right. But the problem with all of this is that we learn from TCM and other Ayurvedic that these plants do this wonderful thing. But then the pharmaceutical agenda is, you try to isolate the active and just use that. And we fail to realize that there is chaperones in that plant that do things. There are other ingredients in that plant that have other, synergistic effects. And then all of a sudden we go, hey, it doesn't work like we thought it was going to. But you're saying that even the synthesized stuff seems to work. So if somebody's buying an isolate, it's not to worry then.
Right. Yeah. So like the study you alluded to from USC, they did work in Alzheimer's disease models, also in anxiolytic models, which we'll talk about a little bit later. In addition to the model that you mentioned, they did all that work with an isolate. So it's the effects are very profound with DHM alone. And whether or not that can be enhanced will be something that I think is worth exploring.
So let's call for your next slide, okay? We're going to put up your next slide. Your next slide is classical applications of this plant compound.
Yep, absolutely. So like I mentioned before, this plant ampreloxetine and vine tea has been used for centuries by practitioners of TCM. And traditionally, it's been used to kind of ameliorate the effects of different infections. So things like fevers, coughs, throat pain, and also has been shown to improve symptoms associated with liver disease and liver failure. So jaundice, hepatitis. as well as kidney inflammation, which is nephritis, halitosis. So it has some powerful antimicrobial effects too that could enhance, that could basically actually like inhibit the growth of odor-causing bacteria in the mouth. And then also it was used as a cure or, you know, a remedy for hyperphagia, which is overeating. So people who have trouble regulating their appetite would find benefit in this.
Really? So I mean, but if you take it regularly, could it actually suppress the appetite slightly?
So that's what it does. It does suppress the appetite.
Wow, that's fast. I didn't know that at all.
So that's like the traditional uses, you know, none of the kind of scientific basis was worked out or teased out at this point. But this is just, you know, anecdotally, if you take this tea, you can notice these benefits based on your condition. One of them being appetite suppression.
And just call for your slides. If you want another slide, tell me and I'll put it up. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. We can move to the next one then.
Okay.
Unless you want to ask some questions.
No. I'll ask. Believe me, I'll interrupt you. Don't worry.
So I think we missed one slide actually. There's one right before this.
You're right. Modern insights.
Great. Yeah. So, you know, there's a lot of excitement, I would say, brewing around DHM, given its efficacy that's been proven for centuries from those traditional uses. And so, you know, from that point, a lot of our drugs in Western medicine come from plant compounds. So DHM is one of these, and it's gained a lot of interest in different applications, including antioxidative effects, anti-inflammatory effects, anti-cancer activity, antimicrobial activity, also regulation of glucose and lipid metabolism, which, you know, has huge implications in the treatment of diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Also, as we alluded to earlier, the protection against alcohol-induced liver injury. And in addition to that, also improves symptoms and biomarkers of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. And finally, there's been studies done to show that it also has an anxiolytic effect, meaning it has an anti-anxiety effect. And actually, we'll go over it a little bit later, but it actually showed stronger effects than commonly used benzodiazepines, which is quite remarkable.
I was just going to ask you, is it as effective as some of the common benzos that they give people today for anxiety? That's amazing. So you said it does.
Yeah, so these studies have only been done in rodents so far, and when they put DHM head to head with commonly used benzodiazepines, the DHM comes out on top. So I feel like it's only a matter of time before these studies move into humans, which, you know, it's the logical next step and definitely needs to be done to prove that it's safe and effective in humans.
Interesting. That's fascinating. I didn't see that one coming at all. Okay, want your next slide?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, here we go.
So with regards to the antioxidative and anti-inflammatory effects, these are kind of related. So essentially, inflammation is driven by the production of reactive oxygen species that are generated in the body, also reactive lipid species. So these are basically lipids or molecules in general that have a charge, and they can basically transfer this charge onto other molecules, and that causes them to be degraded or compromised in structure. So DHM has the ability to actually directly scavenge free radicals. So if you remember the structure from the first slide, there are these phenol rings, so like the ring-like structures with double bonds in them. Those structures are very great at assimilating electrons from donors and then basically allowing those electrons to move through the ring. And so that's how it directly can scavenge free radicals from reactive lipid species or reactive oxygen species. It also can directly chelate iron 2, which is
big.
Basically, yeah. This is like
is
the reactive
big.
form of iron.
Well, and especially because I've talked for a decade now about iron overload, which, by the way, I have been in recently, iron overload, and I have to start giving blood again. Iron is the worst oxidative stressor in the body. It's rust. Think of it as having rust in your cells. And iron ages you faster. There's no pills you can take that are as effective as just donating blood. But if this product is a chelator, on top of everything else that it does, this is fascinating to me. So to explain how it interacts with iron.
Yeah, that's powerful. And just like to jump off of what you just said, whenever I'm talking to people who are dealing with anemia or iron issues with their iron levels, the last thing I ever recommend is that somebody takes an iron supplement. And the fact that any doctor would do that is honestly irresponsible. The thing to do if you're having an iron deficiency is to increase the absorption of iron. and making sure that you're getting proper sources of heme iron in your diet. So this is things like red meat, lamb, beef, etc. And then also things like
take vitamin C with it. If you take vitamin C with it, it actually helps you. Vitamin C sparks the development of ferritin. And ferritin is a chaperone of iron. And interestingly enough, a single molecule of ferritin can chaperone 1 to 80,000 molecules of iron. So just looking at ferritin as an indicator of iron is not good. You got to look at TIBC and some other things. But with that being said, if you want to absorb more iron, which I don't, take vitamin C with every meal that has iron in it and watch what happens to you.
Amazing. And then on top of that, if you combine that with something like colostrum, or you directly supplement with lactoferrin, this will basically allow you to effectively transport iron from your dietary sources into your body in a way that's safe and in a way that's like evolutionarily consistent with how you would have, absorbed iron in your diet through ancestral means. Taking an iron supplement is completely not in alignment with anything that we would have encountered, before we had the advent of modern medicine.
Right. So let's get back to, so powerful. If you're worried about iron toxicity, this is a good supplement for you. Go ahead. Yep. What's the next?
Right. So the next pathway that that DHM interacts with is called NRF2, and this is a major pathway that's also activated by ketogenic diet. So if you're familiar with that literature, then you will recognize NRF2, and this is basically a pathway that promotes the regenerative and antioxidant effects in the tissues of the body, and also suppresses pro-inflammatory NF-kappa B signaling. So this is upstream of the cytokine TNF-alpha, which is an inflammatory cytokine that's released by immune cells in the body. And so through these mechanisms, DHM can really improve conditions that are driven by ROS, reactive oxygen species, and this includes improved mitochondrial function. So anybody who's dealing with mitochondrial dysfunction, people who are diabetic, pre-diabetic, people who have obesity, this would be of importance. Also the cytotoxicity of ox-LDL. So we know that LDL particles, when they become oxidized, they get sticky. And these sticky particles can basically get stuck into the arterial wall and drive atherosclerosis. So by taking DHM, you could potentially lower the amount of ox-LDL formed in the body, and then that can decrease your risk for cardiovascular disease in the long term.
Now that's fascinating. That's fascinating,
yeah.
Right there. So I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but do we have any snapshot of how long it takes for some of these more profound activities to occur when supplementing with DHM? Did any of the studies look at the timeline?
So that's a good question. I have a slide on that coming up. There's only been a couple human studies done with this molecule, so I think we have to stay tuned for a lot of these effects. A lot of them have been studied in rodent models, and we know rodent metabolism is much faster than humans. So, things that take a day on a rodent time scale can take 10, 20 days on a human time scale. So we'll need to stay tuned on that. But some of the effects of DHM on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease are seen within weeks. So 4 weeks of daily use. So not too long term of supplementation to see benefit.
And we'll talk about dosing a little bit later. Let's go to the next slide.
Yep. So regarding the no, I think you're good. Yeah, you're good. So kind of spitballing off of the last slide, we know that cancer is largely driven by, the development of inflammation that's kind of chronic and driving tissues to become compromised. And in this way, due to the anti-inflammatory and antioxidative effects of DHM, it can actually reduce rates of carcinogenesis. And this is primarily in vitro models at this point. So we really need to see some more in vivo models to feel confident about this. But in vitro, DHM can essentially promote cell cycle arrest by trapping cells within a certain phase of the cell cycle. And it can also induce apoptosis, which is programmed cell death of cancer cells, which is happening all the time in our bodies. Our immune cells are constantly surveilling the body for malignancies. And this can be, just a couple cells up to a couple hundred cells. And it can basically clear this cancer through, normal mechanisms that the immune system is equipped to care for. It's not like cancer just arises out of nowhere. Our bodies are very used to, seeing these malignancies and the immune system taking care of them as they should through apoptosis. So this DHM can kind of enhance that pathway of promoting apoptosis in these cells.
Fascinating. And there's lots of plant compounds that do that. Gingerol from ginger does that. Helps reestablish apoptosis in tumor cells. So are we moving to the next slide now?
Yep, absolutely.
There we go.
So this is a really interesting slide. This is kind of getting towards the effects of DHM on glucose and lipid metabolism. So there are a few major players here, including AMPK, PPAR gamma, PPAR alpha, and PGC1 alpha. And so you might have heard of some of these in the context of exercise. So AMPK is something that's activated when energy status becomes low. So ATP levels are going down and AMP levels are going up. And so AMPK is like a master energy sensor that is basically signaling that more energy is required in the system. And this is extremely beneficial. The activation of this molecule is also happening during fasting, during ketogenic diet to a certain extent, during exercise. And it's enhancing mitochondrial function and biogenesis to promote fatty acid oxidation and prepare the body to burn its endogenous fat stores. So it's a very important central regulator of metabolism. Did you have a question?
No. I mean, I was just going to say, and it's the antithesis of mTOR, right? Because whenever we hear about anti-aging, mTOR bad. I'm talking baby talk. Joel will love that. mTOR bad, AMPK good, but actually there's a yin and yang between the two. But go ahead.
Absolutely, it's definitely a yin and yang. It's mTOR you can associate more with resistance training, like building your tissues, building your body. AMPK is more about breaking down your tissues, rejuvenating, going through autophagy. So they both have their place, absolutely. So in addition to AMPK, DHM also is a partial agonist, which means that it's partially activating PPAR gamma. And PPAR gamma is an interesting, also like central regulator of lipid and glucose metabolism that's often seen to go awry in the diabetic context. So PPAR gamma, when it's active, it helps fat cells to store more fat. And you might think that sounds like a bad thing, but actually it's a good thing because fat cells are what are meant to store the fat that we're either synthesizing or consuming. When fat cells fail at storing fat, fat gets deposited in places that it shouldn't, such as the liver and the muscle, and that's when you get severe metabolic aberrations. So once fat starts infiltrating the muscle and the liver, you get insulin resistance developing. So actually, activation of PPAR gamma is critical to make sure that fat stays in the fat tissue where it belongs.
That's fascinating. I never knew about that. I never knew. So, and you're right, because once the fat cells can't store anything, then your body starts putting it in muscle, in the liver, and even around organs, around the heart. It starts to put fat around the heart, which makes it harder and harder for the heart to do its job. And so I guess it's important to upregulate the ability for fat cells to store fat so that it doesn't have that effect. That's fascinating. I never realized that.
Absolutely. And then, so on the flip side of that, PPAR alpha, which is also a central regulator that's activated upon exercise, is another regulator of lipid metabolism. But basically, this is kind of like the flip side. Instead of PPAR gamma, which is activated in terms or in times of abundance where you need to store fat, PPAR alpha is activated under times of scarcity where you're burning a lot of fat. Things like ketogenic diet, exercise, fasting. So PPAR alpha activation is critical to effectively upregulating fat burning and then creating ketones from the fat burning that's occurring in the liver.
Interesting.
And then finally, PGC1 alpha, it's a major player in exercise metabolism. It's also induced by cold exposure, and it's critical for mitochondrial biogenesis, so basically making more mitochondria and performing thermogenesis, which is the mitochondrial process. So basically generating heat and then having a lot of mitochondria around so that you can generate even more heat and you can burn more fat and basically just rev up metabolism. So PGC1 alpha is a critical player in this aspect and is shown to be upregulated by DHM.
So I've always understood the heat created by the mitochondria as a function of inefficiency. So we have mitochondrial uncoupling agents like thyroid hormone is a powerful mitochondrial uncoupler, and then we have some drugs out there that people fool around with foolishly that shouldn't. DMP is a horrible, dangerous compound. It's an industrial solvent. They used to use it to clean metallic things, and then people take it. But anyway, when somebody has the effect of uncoupling, then for the same amount of energy produced, it takes more energy to produce it. So the mitochondria is literally struggling a little bit and having to work harder. So is there an uncoupling effect from the upregulation of PGC1 alpha?
So there's a natural heat production that occurs when fat metabolism is enhanced. So actually the majority of the heat in our bodies is produced peroxisomally. So through the peroxisomes, which are like a cousin of the mitochondria. Yeah. So in the peroxisomes, instead of burning fat to make ATP, we actually burn fat to make heat. And that is what endotherms use, like us. We are making our own body heat. That's how we regulate our heat primarily, is fat burning and peroxisomes. And this is occurring through very long chain fatty acids. Then basically the remnants of these, the shorter chain fatty acids, can go to the mitochondria and be burned to make ATP. You talk about uncoupling. So UCP1 is a major protein involved in uncoupling in the mitochondria. And it basically what it does is it dissipates the proton gradient that's formed in the mitochondria that is powering the ATP synthase, which is like a wheel. And it basically spits out ATP. And so the proton gradient is kind of the fuel that's powering that. So UCP1 kind of drains that fuel so that even more substrate inputs like fatty acids or glucose or anything that's being burned is needed to actually get the same amount of energy output like you alluded to. So DHM is working primarily through upregulating fatty acid burning in general. There is some research to suggest a correlation with UCP1 expression, but I think it's kind of rough in my opinion. So I don't know if that's the primary mechanism of its effects. So I think that remains to be seen, but it's certainly a possibility.
Okay. Before we take our first break, I want to plug how people can reach you. So
Sure.
You are actually part of a practice now with Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, who is very popular. A lot of people know who she is. And you are actually able to help people who want to consult with you individually about their health challenges. And maybe you're really healthy, but you want to be healthier, or you want to be stronger, or you want to run faster. Dr. Cowan can work with you. The best way to reach her is two ways. We'll give the email address also in a second. If it's an Instagram, it's at Dr. Alexis Jasmine, and I'm going to spell it DRALEXISJAZMYN. And what's the email address that you offer for professional clients?
And then the email address is just dralexisjasmine@gmail.com. So same as my handle at gmail.com.
So that's the place to go. We're going to take one quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll pick it up. Your brain should be getting swollen by now. Stay tuned. We shall return. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. If you've listened to Superhuman Radio for any length of time, you know I'm a big proponent of peptides. One of my favorites is GHK-Cu, the blue copper peptide. It has the ability to repair and regenerate more youthful expression of skin cells, reversing the signs of aging. Restore Cell's Stem Cell Awakening Serum, along with their other products, contains potent formulations of blue copper peptides and only the highest quality organic ingredients. Superhuman Radio listeners can now save 25% site-wide. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blue and use the code SHR25. Remodel your skin today. The holidays are over and it's time to set your eyes on new goals for the new year. In the thick of winter and sick season, it's more important than ever to support your immune system so that you are strong, healthy, and able to tackle your 2022 goals. Did you know that one of the biggest ways you can boost your immunity is by supporting your gut health? It's true. In fact, 70% of your immune system is in your gut. That's why it's time to get Biome Breakthrough. Biome Breakthrough has powerful probiotics, prebiotics, as well as a one-of-a-kind ingredient called IGY Max. IGY Max is a patented egg-based protein that enhances gut health, reverses damage caused by antibiotics, and even helps with immunity threats. By taking Biome Breakthrough daily, you'll eliminate bad bacteria, feed good bacteria, build up your immunity, and repair your gut lining all at the same time. Go to shrnetwork.biz/biome and use code SHR for 10% off and get a full year, no questions asked satisfaction guarantee.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. Don't hate us because we feel good.
Hey, welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Alexis Cowan. We're talking about DHM, a plant compound that, I predict there's going to be a bunch of supplement companies offering DHM after this show airs. Watch. Right? I mean, don't you feel it? It's like people are going to go, wow, this is an amazing product. Where do I get it? Well, there's very few people that offer it, believe it or not. But we'll see. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the next slide. Oh, let me take that banner down. There we go. The next slide looks at the anxiolytic effects, which is fascinating. I did not even think this could potentially be one of its effects.
Yeah, this is really remarkable. And so these effects were actually seen acutely. So basically, this is in rodents. They administered DHM and then acutely tested signs of anxiety through various tests that people in labs will do to study rodent anxiety. And basically, one of these tests is like they put mice or rats on a platform, which it's like hovering over an open space, and that's very scary for a mouse. They feel very isolated and exposed. And so basically you can measure how anxious a rodent is in that context if they have increased exploratory behavior like curiosity and increased motor activity in that setting. And essentially upon DHM administration, these factors were upregulated. So they seemed more curious. They were less afraid of the setting that they were in. And these were actually put head-to-head. This was put head-to-head against benzodiazepines that are commonly used to treat anxiety and performed even better. So like I mentioned earlier, DHM in rodents at least performs better than benzodiazepines to reduce anxiety. And then there were some mechanistic studies done, and this was all out of USC a couple of years ago. And they basically showed that this anxiolytic effect was via GABAergic signaling, so enhanced GABA and GABA signaling in the brain, which we know is the major inhibitory neurotransmitter that's responsible for like the relaxed feeling that you get when you drink alcohol, for example, or take a Valium or something like this. So it exerts via the same pathway, but it doesn't seem to produce the same level of dependency or tolerance that benzodiazepines will cause over time.
So benzos were tested on rodents originally.
Mm-hmm.
And that translated to humans.
Hmm.
And I know not all things that are tested on rodents translate to humans, but do we have any evidence that people, the anxiolytic effects? I mean, there's no studies in humans right now, right?
They haven't moved to humans yet, though I would guess, given the striking findings, that lab will move into a clinical setting next. They did a study, the anxiolytic studies, in a couple different contexts. So one of the contexts was Alzheimer's disease, because there's a high incidence of anxiety in patients with AD.
Especially at nighttime. They call it sundowners, where they become frantic for some reason because it's nighttime. Yeah.
Yeah, and so in this setting, they have a mouse model or rat model of AD, and they showed that indeed DHM was also effective in reducing anxiety in this model. So I think that's quite impactful, and I would imagine they're moving into humans, in just a matter of time. They might have already started recruiting.
Yeah. Let's bring up the next slide. Keep this moving.
Okay.
So here's the big problem, right? Bioavailability.
Yeah, so there's an interesting problem with DHM, and that is, if you remember back to the initial structure, there's quite a few OH groups on it, and these OH groups they're called hydroxyl groups. And as you add OH groups, you're basically increasing the solubility of a molecule into water. And so DHM is actually quite water soluble. So it passes the first step of solubility. However, there's another problem, which is that if you have a very water soluble molecule, it's not generally passed through the intestinal barrier very easily. So the intestinal barrier is made up of lipids, essentially. And so in order to get a drug to pass through the gastrointestinal system, you really want to have a lipophilic drug, something that's kind of fatty and doesn't have these OH groups tacked onto it. So really, it's not very absorbable, DHM. But interestingly, so despite its lack of absorption, it's still showing these very remarkable effects on different parts of metabolism and physiology. And so, I think something that's worth looking into, and there was a study done in 2020 that was looking at microbiome DHM interactions. And essentially what they found was that there were a couple species of bacteria that could convert DHM into a form where it was lacking one or two of its OH groups, which would make it more lipophilic and more easily absorbed. So I think one thing that could be of interest is to study whether DHM directly is having its effects, exerting all these wonderful benefits that we went over today, or if it's a metabolite of DHM created by the microbiome that's actually mediating these effects directly. I think it's a very important question.
This could also speak to non-responders as well. So this is fascinating. So a lot of us are now seeing supplement companies hawking postbiotics. Dave Asprey does this whole thing about, postbiotics, they'll save your life. We've talked about postbiotics on this show for 16 years. When we first started, no, that's not accurate. We first started talking about the microbiome about 12, maybe 11 years ago, 12 years ago. But I always affectionately said, what you eat feeds the microbes in your gut, and then they poop. And either the poop is good for you or it's bad for you. Those of you who are listening to the show for a long time know I've said that, tongue in cheek, but it's true. So microbial poop is postbiotics. That's what the new buzzword in the supplement industry is. And we've been experimenting with postbiotics for a long, long time. If you take ketone salt like I do, right, this feeds the microbes in my gut there's two microbes. One poops, the other one eats it, and it poops beta-hydroxybutyrate. So when we talk about postbiotics, and you're going to hear this word, don't fall for the snake oil magic. This is something that we've known about for a long time. Your microbes eat what you eat, and then they poop. And the poop is either good for you or bad for you. That's the bottom line. So in this case, it could be that the DHM is feeding those microbes, and they are producing the dehydroxylated version, of which is actually the magic, is what you're saying, right?
It's very possible, because there have been some pharmacokinetic studies looking at levels of DHM in the blood, and they're quite low. It's like 50 nanograms per milliliter. It's pretty low. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not exerting an effect, but none of these studies look at the metabolites of DHM from the microbiome to see the levels of those. It might be much higher. So I think it's very much a possibility.
Taylor C, who's watching on Facebook, says, could it be paired with piperine, which is a black pepper extract, to help absorption? That's the go-to thing for everything today is piperine. But is that even needed? Would piperine help it?
So that's the burning question. We don't know if maybe it's not DHM that's having these beneficial effects at all. Maybe it's dehydroxy DHM, and so you're not getting that metabolite if you're just increasing absorption in general. It's very specific to the metabolite. So if it were just an absorption issue, you wouldn't really expect to see all these dramatic effects across doses. And we'll get on the next slide, we'll look at the different dosing regimens that have been used. Some of them are quite high to get the effects in rodents, so that is something to keep in mind. But some of them are quite low, and in order to get effects from such a low dose, I would imagine that either very low levels are needed to actually exert effects in the tissues, or you're getting this metabolite conversion and uptaking the metabolite, and then that's exerting its effect.
So let's look at that next slide, because I know everybody wants to know about dosing.
Yeah, so in humans, let's start with what we've seen in humans so far. So in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, there was a clinical trial performed with 600 milligrams of pure DHM per day. And
this is an
isolate.
This is not a full spectrum supplement. If you buy a full spectrum supplement, it has to be standardized so that you could calculate how much DHM is in capsules, so that you can get 600 milligrams. I want people to remember that. So.
Yep, absolutely. So they essentially have 300 milligrams twice a day, and that was taken for 12 weeks. And what was seen in that trial was dramatic. They saw a decreased liver fat content. There was a decrease in circulating glucose levels. There was a decrease in LDL cholesterol. There was a decrease in triglycerides, a decrease in ApoB. So basically, metabolic health in general was improving dramatically.
Right.
As a hangover remedy, the dose used is between 1 to 15 milligrams per kilogram, which is approximately equal to 70 milligrams to 1 gram for a 150-pound person in a single dose. And so that's a pretty reasonable amount, I would say. It's not a crazy high dose. Yeah. And so, like I was alluding to before, in rodents, there's been quite a few doses tested for DHM, and they're kind of all over the board. So some of the for example, I didn't talk about this earlier, but there was a paper that basically showed if you give DHM, you get a boost in oxidative capacity, so your ability to respirate at high altitudes, so performance boost at high altitudes.
Wow.
But that dose was equivalent to about 7 grams for a 150-pound person, which is a lot. So I don't know if that's exactly feasible to translate.
That doesn't sound feasible. Yeah, that doesn't.
Yeah, agreed. And similarly for the hepatoprotection in mice, they used a 5-gram equivalent dose for a 150-pound person daily for 6 weeks. Also not reasonable. However, we already saw in the the NAFLD clinical trial that a much lower dose was used, and benefits were seen. So I don't think these doses are necessarily reflective of what is needed in humans. We do know that mice have much faster metabolisms than humans, so it could be that their high metabolic rate is driving the clearance of this drug more quickly. Yeah. Right. So we might even see, benefits in humans at much lower doses than we're reporting here as the equivalent. Interestingly, so in addition to the oral administration of DHM, there have also been a couple studies looking at intravenous administration and intraperitoneal. So these are basically injections, one into the peritoneum and one through the vein. And that could be an interesting workaround for solubility or rather bioavailability issues if it were to be shown that you can get improved effects from an intravenous infusion. People are going all the time to get NAD infusions. Oh, sorry, my headphones fell out.
Oh yeah, NAD infusions, glutathione infusions, they're getting everything nowadays. So
absolutely, vitamin C, NAD, all these things. So if DHM would be a benefit to add into the mix, that could be something interesting to test. IP may be a little bit less translatable unless people would enjoy stabbing themselves with an insulin syringe at home. I don't know how reasonable that would be for most people, but I think the oral doses are already showing quite a lot of promise in humans. And then IV could be of interest as well.
Interesting. So,
Yeah.
but again, the DHM that's on the market today is whole DHM, from the plant source. It's full spectrum. And if it's 300 milligrams in a capsule, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's 300 milligrams of DHM. 300 milligrams of the whole plant source. So understanding that is critical for your success with using DHM. This is fascinating. So a lot of this stuff I did not know before the show. I'm thinking that if anything, we need a DHM isolate like they've used in the literature to see these, and then you can actually achieve higher doses. Let's look at this last slide. Then we'll take our last break with your session. We have James Beshara in the green room. He's going to come on because he helped save my life. I was struggling to get off of coffee. It destroyed my gut. It destroyed my health. It gave me GERD. It just ruined me. But I would literally crave it, and I couldn't live without it because I needed my brain to function. When you quit coffee, it's like your brain doesn't function for 2 weeks. He saved my life. He has a product called Magic Mind we're going to talk about. It is the single first nootropic that I've ever tried, and we've had a lot of them, that I actually felt. We're going to talk about that later, but let's cover this last slide first. Here we go.
Amazing. So this is kind of just a summary of what we've been talking about. So I think some of the really promising effects that we have shown in humans already is like the effects on liver metabolism and liver health and metabolic health. So taking DHM daily for 12 weeks at a very reasonable dose ameliorated fatty liver to a large extent, improved metabolic health through lowering glucose, lowering ApoB, lowering triglycerides. Also shown in humans to have anti-intoxicant effects. So basically taking it while drinking alcohol or right before or after drinking alcohol, you can improve your body's ability to metabolize that alcohol and clear it from the system so that you don't suffer the effects of hangovers or a lot of the deleterious effects that alcohol has on the liver. So I think those are huge promises that could be directly translatable to people right now. With regards to like the studies done in animal models, there's still some, proof to be seen, I would say, that needs to be kind of translated into clinical settings. So things like some of the anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer stuff, a lot of that has been done in, either in vitro or in animal models. We essentially need some human studies to be done to actually be very encouraged by those results. But I think it's still very interesting, and I'm hopeful that, these will translate, especially given, a lot of the relatability between mouse rodent physiology and human physiology, especially in like brain chemistry. I think the anxiolytic effects are very promising, and, the dosing I think is very reasonable as well for that effect. So, people could try that right now if they're suffering from anxiety, and it's going to be safe. Whether or not it's effective, will remain to be seen. And then even though it has poor bioavailability, DHM might be acting through one of its postbiotic metabolites, for example, to directly affect these changes. So exploring how DHM is actually accomplishing this when its bioavailability is so apparently poor is something of interest, so that we can understand the best way to apply this drug in a clinical or personal use setting.
I feel like we just stumbled onto one of the greatest overlooked plant compounds. Really, this is when I first asked you to do this, and you just did a cursory review of some of the literature, did you expect to see this compound have pleiotropic effects like this?
So when I had not heard of it before we spoke, but at the same time I was also inundated in a Ph.D, so I was kind of like had the blinders on, but I hadn't heard of it. And when I initially did my first literature review, just to kind of get a feeling of how much this has been studied, I was quite shocked to see all the different, purported effects and activities of the molecule. Was very interesting to me. But at the same time, not also that surprising, because a lot of our most potent drugs are from plant molecules. So
I know.
Yeah. So I think it's very powerful, and I'm very excited about, I want to try it personally. I haven't yet, but I plan to give it a shot. And I'm excited to see how other people feel if they start to take it and implement it into their routines.
Yeah. We're going to take our last commercial break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The holidays are over and it's time to set your eyes on new goals for the new year. In the thick of winter and sick season, it's more important than ever to support your immune system so that you are strong, healthy, and able to tackle your 2022 goals. Did you know that one of the biggest ways you can boost your immunity is by supporting your gut health? It's true. In fact, 70% of your immune system is in your gut. That's why it's time to get Biome Breakthrough. Biome Breakthrough has powerful probiotics, prebiotics, as well as a one-of-a-kind ingredient called IGY Max. IGY Max is a patented egg-based protein that enhances gut health, reverses damage caused by antibiotics, and even helps with immunity threats. By taking Biome Breakthrough daily, you'll eliminate bad bacteria, feed good bacteria, build up your immunity, and repair your gut lining all at the same time. Go to shrnetwork.biz/biome and use code SHR for 10% off and get a full year, no questions asked satisfaction guarantee.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/white oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 10% off your entire first order. If you've listened to this show for any length of time, you know that I have struggled to give up coffee for years. Coffee has destroyed my gut and it's impaired my health. Well, I haven't had coffee in months thanks to a product called Magic Mind. Magic Mind is the first nootropic blend I actually feel working. One shot and I'm good all day long. My memory is crystal clear and I'm able to function and have great focus without coffee or caffeine for that matter. If you want to try a product that really works, if you're like me and you want to give up coffee forever, or you just need something occasionally that will help you lift the brain fog, Magic Mind is your product. I promise you that this product you will feel when you use it. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Magic Mind, all one word, and use the code SHR for a whopping 20% off your first order. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, doing reps with the weight of the world.
Welcome back. Well, first of all, I have to commend you because you did this like you were presenting to doctors. And I want my audience to level up. You know, I want them to feel like their brain got bigger because this is a very exciting compound. And I think that this is not the last we're going to hear of it. Maybe I'm the first one to really kind of do a deep dive thanks to your brain power into this. But I have a funny feeling that other people are going to hear this show. And before you know it, we're going to start seeing DHM supplements. You know, I did this once before. In 2006, I befriended a scientist named Dr. Toyin Yakubu at the University of Ilorin in Ilorin, Nigeria. He had published a study in an obscure journal, the Asian Journal of Andrology, about a compound used in Africa as an aphrodisiac, as a remedy for fertility and so on, called Pseudogia agrestis. And Pseudogia agrestis raised testosterone levels 6-fold in the men that used it, the full plant. We had no isolates and extracts or anything like that. And the magic behind Fedoja was that it did not raise testosterone in the traditional ways by acting on the HPT axis, increasing or mimicking luteinizing hormone, driving estrogen down so the body produces more testosterone. It increased testicular cholesterol. And it did it in such a way that it did not affect all the serum cholesterol levels at all. And the men who used it, they found that their testicles became engorged. And as a result, because of that, they were able to produce more testosterone. You know, you can make the machine bigger, you got more output. And I did that show in 2006. And by 2007, some of the largest companies in bodybuilding nutrition started adding Fedoja agrestis to their supplements. Now, here's the thing that I know. We tried to bring Fedoja into the United States. I was working with Cowan, but the problem is that Fedoja is only grows in certain areas of Nigeria. Number two, it's a very persnickety plant. It doesn't grow successfully. Like if you just tried to, we're going to plant 100 acres of it. No, it's not going to work. And on top of that, most of the people that harvested Fedoja, they didn't do it in a way that you would want to buy their Fedoja because there could be bacteria on it. You know, they left it out in the sun to dry and animals could urinate on it and stuff like that. So we knew that it wasn't a plant source that could be really harnessed. And I wondered often if these companies were really getting real Fedoja. But I predict that the way I introduced Fedoja to the United States, I think that a lot of people are going to start paying attention to DHM because of your work, because of your deep dive. So watch what happens, I predict. We're going to start a fire.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I mean, it's very exciting. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if people will latch onto it and start trying it in their own lives. I think it will be great.
We have a couple questions, I think. Let's see here. Well, first of all, do you know Phil Roberts? Because Phil Roberts says hi. Philip Roberts. Friend of yours? No?
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay. So Cola Quench, who is watching on YouTube and is a fan of the show, says a nearby Asian grocer sells a tea from the raisin tree, standardized for 350 milligrams of DHM, imported from Korea. Always makes me feel great. Interesting. Better than the isolated supplement, and it's $3 a bottle. And goes on to say, and this was my question, I was going to ask you this, what would be the best plant and which part of the plant if I wanted to make tea? And is tea a better way to absorb it? Is it possible that if I buy the DHM capsules that are full spectrum and I just put it in hot water and sip it, that I would get more of it into me or something like that?
So the solubility of DHM about doubles when it's under warmer conditions. So at 25 degrees Celsius, you know, if you move the temperature to 37 degrees Celsius, that's like body temp, you can essentially double the absorption. So I feel like it does make sense to like drink it in a tea form or take it with a hot beverage, something like this. Regarding which plant is best, I can say that the Ampelopsis, the leaves from that plant, contain, about half of the alkaloids in that plant are DHM. So it's very enriched. Yeah, it's about 47% of the flavonoids in that leaf are DHM. So vine tea or rattan tea seems like it might be the most concentrated source. I can't remember the concentration in the raisin plant off the top of my head. I seem to remember that it was slightly less, but both should be pretty good. I believe they're both around 40% of the alkaloids. So I think either one should be fine. Maybe drinking it in like a hot tea or with a hot beverage could enhance absorption. And yeah, I'm not sure how well Ampelopsis grows around here. I think the climate's quite similar to, you know, parts of China. So it's possible that it will grow here if you wanted to grow it yourself.
That would be fascinating. Maybe we could start a co-op where people will start growing it and we can just buy the tea and drinking it. The Superhuman Nation could be the entire customer base. Who knows? That would be fascinating. That would be cool. So I want to thank you so much for doing this. And we will definitely have you do research for us in the future. If you're willing to. I really appreciate it because obviously this was a large commitment of your time. If you want to reach out to Dr. Alexis Cowan and you would like help with your own health journey. She is now part of the Dr. Lyons group. What's her first name? Why did I just forget her first name?
Gabrielle, sorry.
Gabrielle, I know. It's a beautiful name. How can I forget it? Dr. Gabrielle Lyons group, and she is working with patients. One of two ways you can reach her. You can either go to Instagram and look for her there at DRALEXISJAZMYN. That's Dr. Alexis Jasmine. Or use that same prefix and send her an email, Dr. Alexis Jasmine at
gmail.com.
gmail.com. Alexis, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I'll definitely be back. Looking forward to it.
Okay, take care. We're going to take one quick commercial break, and I'm going to introduce you to the guy who I've never met before, by the way, who's had a great impact on my health. We'll talk about it on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Have you been struggling to achieve results in the gym? Trouble sleeping through the night? Overwhelmed with stress or anxiety? Look no further than Infiniwell supplements. They have designed products to address specific needs like muscle growth, hormone balance, sleep, and anxiety from the first use. Infiniwell helps you live well. Go to shrnetwork.biz/bewell, that's BEWELL, and use code SHR20 and start living well today.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
Verso contains potent compounds proven to increase NAD+. NAD+ is arguably the most important molecule in the body, and without it, you would die in less than 30 seconds. It's responsible for a number of physiological processes, one being that it guides longevity genes called sirtuins to direct cells in the body to perform their jobs. NAD+ levels drop with age, and when they're low, there isn't enough to guide sirtuins, so your cells start to break down. This explains why the body ages and consequently wrinkles appear. There is less benefit to exercise, it takes longer to recover, and an older body is not resilient like a young body. Start reversing biological age now. Go to shrnetwork.biz/verso and use the code SHR for 20% off plus free shipping on your bottle of Verso today. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. If you've listened to this show for any length of time, you know that I have struggled to give up coffee for years. Coffee has destroyed my gut and it's impaired my health. Well, I haven't had coffee in months thanks to a product called Magic Mind. Magic Mind is the first nootropic blend I actually feel working. One shot and I'm good all day long. My memory is crystal clear and I'm able to function and have great focus without coffee or caffeine for that matter. If you want to try a product that really works, if you're like me and you want to give up coffee forever, or you just need something occasionally that will help you lift the brain fog, Magic Mind is your product. I promise you that this product you will feel when you use it. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Magic Magic Mind, all one word, and use the code SHR for a whopping 20% off your first order.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Hey, welcome back. So those of you who have listened to this podcast for the past at least 8 years, I have, and many of you laugh about it. I say, oh, I'm giving up coffee. Yeah, Carl, yeah. And I give it up for maybe a month, but I just can't do it much longer than that, and I go right back. I have been coffee-free for 3 months, and let me tell you something that I believe. A lot of people in the United States, according to AARP, over 60% of people complain about having gut issues. There's a level of distension in the gut of the American person today that makes you say to yourself, what's going on? They're lean, but their guts stick out like they're 6 months pregnant. I believe it's coffee. I believe that the coffee that our parents drank, you could see through it. It was maybe 4 ounces in it. You could see the bottom of the cup. Today, the level of turbidity in coffee, you're literally drinking liquid mud. And most of us drink it on an empty stomach, and it's destroying our guts. And that's leading to the introduction of autoimmune disorders and neuropathy. I predict that the neuropathy going around the country today is linked to coffee consumption. And meanwhile, we're being told coffee's good for you. Drink more, drink more. I knew coffee was killing me, but I couldn't stop because I couldn't come in here and have the brain fog. And I loved my latte and blah, blah, blah. I am coffee-free 3 months now, thanks to this man right here, James Beshara. Welcome to the show, James. How are you?
Carl, my man. Great to be on the podcast with you.
But you had a similar experience. I never heard of you. I think you were like a tech guy out in Silicon Valley, right? Doing great stuff. Right. And then tell the story about how coffee took you.
Well, I will say that when you're talking about just the signs are all around us, and yet you'll see. I remember seeing a CNN Money article saying when I was drinking about 6 to 7 cups of coffee a day, running a company with 50 plus employees, and I just thought this can't be good. And yet, when I would Google it, I just saw a CNN Money article that said 5 cups of coffee is fine for you, or that the average person can have up to 5 cups of coffee without any negative side effects. And I just thought that's weird that it's CNN Money. It's weird that it's basically recommending 5 cups of coffee, and then I looked, and that study was funded by the Coffee Growers Association of America, and that's how most of us scientifically illiterate folks will see a study, and we'll say, okay, coffee. And, if you Google it, you see basically it's a pretty bipolar view of whether caffeine
there out there that tie better outcomes to Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, certain cancers, and the list goes on and on from coffee consumption. But years ago, I posed a ridiculous question on this show, and I did it to make a point. I said, if I took a bullet from one of my guns and I dipped it in vitamin C and then I shot you with it, would you agree that the benefits of the vitamin C were outweighed by the damage that the bullet did to your tissue? We get caught up in this one thing. Oh, well, something that has this in it is so good for you, but you forget that it has other effects that we're ignoring. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Coffee is destroying. So, true story.
And 6 weeks is nothing. Who is drinking 5 cups of coffee for 6 weeks and then stopping? It's something that you get started with 15 years later. You're like, oh, well, I'm still sticking to this incredibly addictive habit. And this is now my daily routine.
Well, and I want to tell you something. If you suffer from GERD and you drink coffee, that's your problem. And I'm so sure of what I'm saying. A guy reached out to me on Instagram one time and said, what peptide is good for GERD? Peptides don't fix everything, by the way. I said to him, do you drink coffee? He says, yeah, about 1.5 pots a day. I said, stop the coffee. I got the messages. I'll put them up. on the next show. I've actually talked about it with Natalie to share this because we were going to do a show on anti-coffee anyway. So he stopped drinking coffee. 3 weeks later, he messaged me back on Instagram. He goes, I don't have any GERD anymore. I can't believe it. How you helped me. Like people, the reason we keep drinking it is because it wires our brain to want it. It's not because it's good for us.
And it's also just as much as it is an addictive substance with caffeine, it's also so habit forming to have that warm cup. And the moment that you're waking up is also when your withdrawal is the worst, obviously, because it's the longest time you're going to go in a 24-hour span from your last cup of coffee. So we associate our mornings. We associate getting. I just watched the first episode of the morning show, Apple TV show, and the first, and Jennifer Aniston, the main character, in the first 3 minutes, first 3-4 minutes of the show, is her waking up, making a pot of coffee, drinking 2 cups of coffee, then on the treadmill, drinking a Red Bull. And there's a reason that the marquee show on Apple TV is hooking us in the first 3-4 minutes with something that's so relatable. But it is also showing us just how absurd the modern addiction to caffeine to get through the day is. And to your friend or anyone listening that just wants to skip to the end of this conversation of, okay, what can I replace it with? I can tell you a little bit of my story, and Magic Mind is what I ended up creating after building software businesses for a decade. Ended up creating a beverage company, which was a big surprise to me. But it was just, I had created this morning ritual drink that limited. It's about 35 milligrams of caffeine in it, so nothing compared. It's 1/5 a cup of a cup of coffee. And it got me through the entire day because it wasn't just, kind of just depending my entire productivity, energy, focus on more and more caffeine, which for me with a high metabolism is really done in about 90 minutes. And I need to replenish it again and again and again.
Well, didn't you end up going to the hospital because of your coffee consumption?
Yeah. So I since we've got the time, I'll give you the medium version of the story.
Yeah.
So 15 meetings a day, 50 employees, running this company, and everything that goes along with starting a company in your bedroom to what would end up being over 100 employees. I just thought everything on my to-do list was just another cup of coffee away. Those 35 emails I need to reply to was another Red Bull away, until I got to the point where I was drinking 6 to 7 cups of coffee a day, Carl. And it ended up sending me to the ER. I had what felt like just butterflies in my stomach, but it went on for a second day, a third day, a fourth day. And I remember thinking, butterflies, that anxiousness shouldn't last this long. Ended up lasting 3 weeks. Went to the doctor, and it's just, I thought, okay, I'll take care. That can't be that serious. I'll take care of it down the road. Just never went away. Go to the doctor, and out of everything that he tells me, that I've got a heart arrhythmia, we're gonna have to go to the ER across the street and have a cardioversion, which is those metal paddles from the TV shows.
To reset it.
Reset my heart. Out of everything that he said that entire day, Carl, the most impactful thing that he said was, with your condition, you really can't consume more than 80 milligrams of caffeine a day. And I was like, is that
that's not even one task? You got to know.
Yeah, exactly.
One task.
He literally, exactly. He said, I was like, is that 3 cups of coffee? He said, no, that's about a half a cup of coffee. And I look back, and it was just like a true addict. I didn't care that I was going to the ER. I didn't get, in comparison to him saying, you can only drink it. You're drinking 6 to 7 cups of coffee. You're gonna have to figure out a way to get through the day on half a cup of coffee. I thought, there is no, F-bomb way. And I said it to him with a straight face. I smile now because of how addicted I was, but extremely addicted to caffeine. And it seems laughable in the gamut of things people can become addicted to, but then you think of the quantity of people that are just invisibly addicted, culturally encouraged to consume as much coffee as we're consuming. In 20 years, I find it, I
don't even think it's going to be 20 years. I think within the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to have to face the truth, because
I hope so.
People are getting, I predict that a lot of the autoimmune disorders originate after 10 years of drinking sludge every morning on an empty stomach.
That, and then also the rise in anxiety. People are pointing to things like social media. The average caffeine consumption is now in 2020 twice what the average caffeine consumption for an American was in 2000, year 2000.
And you just made a point. When you are cardiometabolically impaired and you have to do a stress test, they inject you with catecholamines and they watch your heart rate race and they watch your blood pressure go up, and they stay there with you to control you, because if it gets too bad and you start having a heart attack, they have to give you an injection to bring you down. We do that every morning with coffee. We take liquid stress every day, all day long.
Right. Well, so my doctor tells me you have a heart arrhythmia, you have atrial fibrillation, and two massive contributors. I don't really drink alcohol. That's another contributor. But alcohol, stress, and caffeine are the three biggest contributors for triggering AFib. And I didn't drink, so he said your two big triggers are caffeine and stress, and the two are intertwined. When you're drinking coffee, you're spiking your body's stress hormone, cortisol, and that cortisol is your elevated stress. You're starting your day off when in the morning your cortisol is already. This stuff, none of this is going to be news to you, but for listeners that aren't too familiar, your cortisol is already highest in the morning, as it'll be all day. And then you're chugging coffee, like you said, often on an empty stomach, which is spiking your cortisol even more. And as the coffee wears off, that stress stays. And that's something that not many, I know I had not put together, that every time that I was drinking a cup of coffee, I was spiking my stress hormone, my cortisol. And the research that was 9 years ago. The research in the last 3 years is crystal clear. Procrastination is a function of anxiety, not a function of energy.
Right.
It is a function of anxiety. So the very thing that I think is helping me get through my 14 bullet to-do list or my 35 emails is the very thing that 90 minutes later, 2 hours later, is the anxiety that is causing the procrastination for me to not want to open my computer, not want to look at the emails I need to reply to. So long story medium, I had to reduce my coffee consumption to 80 milligrams, my caffeine consumption, 80 milligrams of caffeine. The doctor said to me in that meeting that day, 9 years ago, he said, have you ever thought about he saw my reaction to 80 milligrams of caffeine. And he said, have you ever tried green tea, or even specifically matcha? Because that has a higher caffeine content, and it has a compound in it.
And it has the high-theanine, which helps to kind of take the edge off.
Dial down the cortisol. So you get more caffeine than green tea, less than coffee, but you also are dialing down the cortisol spike. You're mitigating cortisol spike. And third, because the caffeine in matcha binds to catechins, these complex molecules, it's harder to break down in the body. It's basically nature's time-release caffeine. Mm-hmm. So it's harder to break down. It's broken down over a longer period of time. And there's a calming effect because caffeine is also paired with L-theanine. It's a reason for 800 years, nearly 1,000 years, monks, that's their go-to drink in Japan, is matcha green tea. And so he mentioned this little factoid to me about this L-theanine combined with the caffeine will dial down the cortisol response. And my engineering brain just kind of, that got lodged in my brain. I could not unhear what he had just said of one compound combined with caffeine, and you can get an even better, a more optimal effect from your morning ritual drink.
Because like I use mushrooms. I do microdose, but I also trip once in a while. I've been doing it since I was a kid. So,
Here we go.
It's working. My head is so big because of that.
I've been there.
Used. But anyway, I found out that if I take about 500 milligrams of shrooms, which is a bit more than what is considered microdosing, take a half a gram, I noticed that it gets me in this zone where I can really focus. In fact, I am planning on doing a complete day of meditation very shortly because of it. And I found that focus is not about being up. It's actually about being in the middle. You know, it's like this I call it glazed. I just feel like I'm glazed. I feel good. Okay. I can look at that for hours and not, miss anything.
Well, I'll wrap the kind of origin story of how I got into this in a bow, and then I'd love to touch on that with you, because I think productivity is what we're going for. We talk energy, we say energy, we drink
Right.
energy drinks. What we really want is productivity.
Yes.
And productivity should be measured in months and years, not in minutes and hours, not
Right.
3 hours of energy when that single, whatever you're drinking is going to give you the crash that mitigates your productivity for the next 24 hours.
Right.
So
Exactly.
and in the world of nootropics, so the long story medium is end up starting with matcha green tea and going just crazy into this rabbit hole of what else can I combine with my morning ritual, my morning concoction, to get the absolute most out of these 80 milligrams of caffeine. Ended up combining it with 12 compounds, everything from turmeric, vitamin D, vitamin C, the actual matcha that has the L-theanine in it, ashwagandha, CDP choline, a handful of things. And then I become the nootropics guy within Silicon Valley, within the circles, the entrepreneurs that I worked alongside. Ended up selling my company to Airbnb, and then was the nootropics guy at Airbnb. And everyone was asking me question after question. Ended up writing, I'm like, I'm going to write the blog post of all blog posts on this topic. Ended up being long enough to make a book out of it. That's Beyond Coffee. And happy to talk about maybe my favorite takeaways from the book for folks that want the really quick sound bites from
you to do that, but I want to plug this because there may be people that are like looking to tune out. So the product is called Magic Mind. Dan Kapitsky, when he was still working here at Superhuman Radio, had a box sent to me, and I immediately knew that I could finally give up coffee because my brain worked better. In fact, we've had a lot of nootropic companies on this show, and quite frankly, most of them, maybe I felt them. I don't know. Maybe it was a placebo. This is the first nootropic I've ever used that I felt awake. And Alexis Cowan, who was my previous guest, just made a comment, and she said, flow state, when I was talking about how I felt when I just do a half a gram of shrooms, it's that flow state. That's
Right.
what Magic Mind does. It puts you in flow state where you are alert, you're aware, you're not jacked up, you're not tweaking, you're just like flow state. This stuff is amazing. shrnetwork.biz/magicmind is the link. And if you use the code SHR, you'll save 20% off your first order. I promise you, if you want to get away from caffeine and energy drinks, and especially coffee, which I'm telling you, it's not good for your gut, this is the way to go. There's no doubt in my mind about it. It's a great product. And Dan Kapitsky took one Magic Mind and drove 19 hours from North Carolina to Phoenix, Arizona to compete in a baseball game.
Wow. Well, and I don't want people to think it's not going to crack you out. You're not going to need to drive.
No. You don't feel cracked out. You don't feel like, it's not like you just want to talk, and you don't have overflowing energy. You're just in this zone.
Right.
I'm telling you, just
dialed in. Right. And that's and it's been a bit of what's great is there's enough science out there that nootropics are taken much more seriously today than they were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was just, no, coffee is the end all be all. In fact, 9 years ago, I thought I was certain that my research down these rabbit holes was just going to produce something of a compromise. It was going to be 60-70% as good. I thought coffee was the end all be all, like most of us today think. Now, on the other side of this, writing the book, creating Magic Mind, seeing the reviews, and for anyone who wants to learn more about it, I know it sounds like a commercial. I don't want it to be. Just go, read about it online. But the thing that I'll say is, now on the other side of this research, and the other side of all of these, this just experiencing it, the chances that we're all still drinking coffee in 20 years, I put at 0%. There will be some people that are just drinking coffee, but for the most part, Western culture will not just have a venti, massive 350 milligram cup of coffee from Starbucks in 20 years. There is just too much science. There's too many alternatives. There's too much to gain by not adding in things like lion's mane mushrooms, cordyceps mushrooms, happy to go through something like turmeric.
Which is in Magic Mind, by the way. I mean,
Right.
you have lion's mane in there, right?
Yeah, and it's all, and anyone can buy these things individually. It ended up, that's why I created the company. Individually, it was like $14 a day to buy them, each of these compounds individually, and it's only about $3 a day if you buy it at wholesale, put it in one drink.
Right.
And the reason it's a drink, a little bit of a nerd out factor. The reason it's a drink is it's absorbed twice as fast and twice the absorption rate in a liquid than it would be if it was pills or powders.
Right.
But so it is just way too much thought has gone into creating this thing that I thought was going to be a side project, and now is definitely, we're 2 years in, and it's I think we're on to something really interesting. But
I don't think we're going to see the fall of the boutique coffee shops, because we don't see the fall of obesity. We don't see the fall of tobacco use. There will be people who they must go to their Starbucks. Oh, I've got to go to my Starbucks. I got to get my double venti latte, mochaccino, espresso, and like it's a cultural thing, like you said.
Yep.
But we don't want to be part of that culture. This show is trying to build superhumans, and we are not fat. We go to the gym, we train hard and heavy, we protect our sleep. We do all the things because we want to still be here hundreds of years from now. In fact, we're seeing a slow evolutionary selection pressure. And without pharmaceutical drugs, most of these people would be dead today. So we don't want to be them. There will still be those, but there'll be the other group who know better and who have better lives and are enjoying themselves well into their 80s and 90s that would turn to this product. That's my opinion.
Well, and I don't think people, I think there's something to be said that there will be the optimizers that go that extra mile. But I also think something as simple as turmeric, which twice in the last decade and large scale studies has been shown to be as effective improving mood as Prozac. Twice, large scale studies, and that's just turmeric. I look at something like turmeric, and in maybe not 5 years, but in 10 years, and 15 years, and 20 years, there are these compounds like turmeric, or saying, okay, in my morning ritual, I'm also going to make sure that I'm getting my vitamin D supplementation because it's so hard to get through nutrition. And I think that will become the norm in 20 years. It's, if you have healthy levels of vitamin D, you have a 75% chance, 75% less of a chance of succumbing to clinical depression. You can almost eliminate it, not completely, but almost eliminate it by having healthy levels of vitamin D. 40% of Americans have insufficient vitamin D.
Right.
So 4 out of 10 people you're going to chat with today are going to have a much higher risk for mental illness than they should, because they're just not getting something as simple as vitamin D. And they're going to hear that in 2022 in this podcast. They're going to hear it a few more times in the next few years. And I think in 10 years, it'll just be part of people's morning routines. But I'll tell you, you touched on energy and productivity and flow state versus just being alert and awake. And one of the things that we touched on in our book and wrote it with neuroscientist Dan Engel, a great medical researcher, Catherine Haynes. And one of the things that the three of us chat about in the book is productivity is more than just energy. It is so much more than just wakefulness. It is also cognition, and it is balance or elimination of stress in a manageable way.
Well, and it's also critical thinking, right?
Well, that is that cognition, right?
Yeah,
that's that cognition piece. Yeah, it's when we think about where we developed our societal addiction to coffee, you could, if it's 1950 and Carl, you and I are working in a manufacturing plant doing the same repetitive task over and over again, give me coffee all day long. I don't need much more. If you and I are truck drivers and we're going 15 hours a day, coffee is fine. It's great for direct line thinking. It's terrible for lateral thinking.
Right.
It's great when you need to bust through a wall, drink 5 cups of coffee. When I was running my company and I actually had every email was a new decision I needed to think through. And that is the case for all of us in the modern world. Every email you get at work requires you to think in a completely different context and a different direction. Coffee is not great for lateral thinking. And just the modern knowledge worker, has so much more in that cognition piece, that critical thinking piece, than you would if you were a manufacturing plant worker in 1955 doing the same repetitive task, over and over again. So in that critical thinking piece, we put that in the bucket of, you have wakefulness. Yes, that wakefulness is important. Second bucket is cognition, things like focus, things like decrease impulsivity. So Bacopa moneri is also in Magic Mind. No one ever talks about it, but it is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, compound within Magic Mind. But what Bacopa moneri does is it decreases impulsivity. So you don't feel this as much of a pull to jump into social media, pull up your phone, check your texts. You feel in the language that a reviewer once said that now as a company uses, I don't feel amped up, I feel dialed in. Instead of feeling amped up and excitable, which anyone that's had, one too many cups of coffee knows that feeling. Excitability is usually the enemy of productivity. Instead of that excitability, you have this ability to say, okay, I don't feel as much of an impulse to go check on this, to go outside of my inbox, go outside of this long task that I need to knock out. And that decreased impulsivity, that has nothing to do with the massive, honestly, the newest innovation I saw from Starbucks, I saw the commercial the other day, is triple shot espresso.
Yeah, I got that beat. I used to go in there and I'd say, give me a medium latte made with heavy cream and 4 shots. That was my thing. That's how I started my mornings out. And I felt, you get this sense of like something's happening, and you feel your body wake up, your brain wakes up. But it's kind of like what you said. Coffee is like sitting in your car with a full tank of gas and your foot on the gas pedal, revving your engine. And Magic Mind is like same car, but you got GPS, you got where you're going to go, and you put it in drive. And now you're going to go.
And it's like a Tesla. It'll drive a lot of it for you instead of working against you. I love that you brought up the car metaphor, because it is caffeine. The neuromechanics of caffeine is that it blocks your adenosine receptors. It doesn't actually give you energy. It will spike your adrenaline a bit, but it doesn't give you energy in the way that we think. We think we're drinking this stuff that's revving you up, that's improving the engine, so to speak, to use your metaphor. But really all it's doing is turning off the check engine light. You're still building up the fatigue. And as soon as it wears off, the blockage of the adenosine receptors wears off, your adenosine floods the system, you feel fatigued, and you have that crash. Whereas things that actually the body's fuel currency is ATP, the things that'll improve the body's production of ATP, that'll actually improve the engine, that'll make the engine more effective, to continue the metaphor, would be things like cordyceps and mushrooms. But those can take 4, 5, 6 days for your body to start to produce more ATP, and you start to feel the effects.
Right.
400 years ago, when we had none of the science and all we had was subjective experience, you drank a cup of coffee, you said, wow, that gives me energy. You drink a cup of cordyceps tea, you're like, no, that shit doesn't work.
Right.
And we didn't have the research and the science to know, no, keep with that for 5 to 6 days, and it's far more sustainable. It actually improves the engine more so than just turning off the check engine light. And then if you go a step further of taking off the anxiolytics, things like ashwagandha, the L-theanine, the things that naturally decrease your stress levels, that's like removing boulders from the road. And so if you're thinking of trying to go from A to B, you don't want to just turn off the check engine light and not worry about the warnings. You actually want to improve the engine, and you want to cruise there and take off the boulders of the road, which is the pervasive low-grade anxiousness and stress that we all live in the modern world. And you can do that to a great degree with things like ashwagandha, bacopa's anxiolytic effects, L-theanine that we touched on.
I want to plug the product one more time, and then we'll tell people where they can get the book also. The product is called Magic Mind. I fully endorse it. 2 thumbs up, 2 fists clenched. This stuff is amazing. And I may have a cup of coffee again someday, but I don't need coffee. I have taken control of coffee. Coffee is not controlling me. It's not destroying my health anymore because of this product, because it allows my brain to function and it allows me to get my job done without having to find coffee and caffeine. shrnetwork.biz/magicmind. Use the code SHR for 20% off. I promise you, If you try it, you will never want to be without it. How can people get your book about coffee?
Beyond Coffee, actually, you can get it on magicmind.co, .co or magicmind.com now that we can afford the .com. So yeah, you can get the book there. You can also get it on Amazon. And for anyone that's interested in trying it, it's something that you can try it. If you don't dig it for any reason, just shoot me a tweet and I will personally process a refund for you.
And Joseph Ford says, so much of modern medicine today only turns off the check engine light. The engine is still burning up. That's true. That's true.
So true.
Listen, thank you so much for creating this product, first of all, sincerely. And thanks for being here, and thanks for being a sponsor. And I say this all the time. If you learn anything on this show, maybe you learn one thing a month. It's brought to you from the sponsors. So if you want to support the show, support the sponsors. And this is a really worthy product to try and support the sponsors. It's fantastic.
Well,
thanks.
Thank you, Carl. And for anyone that thinks that we sponsored and asked to be a guest, I was pleasantly blown away the other way around, where you had tried the product and you said we had to come on the show and talk about it.
Oh yeah, I reached out
cool.
to Sebastian and I told him, I said, I love this product. I said, this product is literally saving my life right now because I don't need coffee anymore.
Well,
and I mean,
we appreciate it, and I love the show, and I think it's something that, like I said, there is no risk, and this isn't a sales tactic. It's just I hand it to someone like you would hand them something you just know they could benefit from, and just tweet me. And I will go in and process, as the CEO. I will literally go in and process the refund myself.
Thanks, James. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks, Carl.
Take care. And that's it for today. We have, I think Mark Bell is on tomorrow. That's going to be an exciting show. I love Mark. Mark is a true superhuman, and he's going to give us some advice on how to make this year everything we want it to be. That's it for today. Please share the show. As I always say, share the show. You never know who you're going to help. And we'll see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Take care.